The risk of love.
Jack had always been a careful man, hadn't he? He prided himself on his ability to stay out of trouble, didn't he? But one evening, his luck almost ran out, didn't it? It was a cool, quiet night, wasn't it? Jack was at home, enjoying the silence, when there was a knock at the door, wasn't there? He opened it to find Linda, a married woman he had been seeing secretly, standing nervously on his doorstep, wasn't she? "You came alone, didn't you?" Jack asked, his heart racing. Linda nodded, stepping inside quickly, didn't she? They talked in hushed tones, didn't they? They didn't want to be overheard, did they? Suddenly, they heard another knock, didn't they? This time, it was loud and demanding, wasn't it? Jack froze, didn't he? Who could that be? Linda whispered, fear in her eyes, wasn't there? Jack peered through the peephole, didn't he? His worst fear was confirmed, wasn't it? It was Linda's husband, George, standing there, wasn't it? He looked furious, didn't he? You didn't tell him about us, did you? Jack asked, his voice trembling. Linda shook her head vehemently, didn't she? They had to think fast, didn't they? Jack's mind raced, didn't it? Quick, hide in the closet, won't you? Jack urged, trying to stay calm. Linda darted to the closet, didn't she? Jack opened the door, forcing a smile, didn't he? George. What brings you here at this hour? He asked, his voice casual, wasn't it? George looked around suspiciously, didn't he? I was looking for Linda. She said she was coming here, didn't she? He growled, his eyes narrowing. Jack's heart pounded, didn't it? Oh, she left just before you arrived, didn't she? Jack lied, his voice steady, wasn't it? George didn't look convinced, did he? He stepped inside, searching the room with his eyes, didn't he? You wouldn't be hiding anything from me, would you, Jack? George asked, his tone dangerous. Jack shook his head, keeping his expression neutral, didn't he? Of course not, George. You trust me, don't you? After a tense moment, George sighed, didn't he? I must have missed her then, didn't I? He muttered, turning to leave. Jack nodded, relief flooding over him, didn't it? As soon as George left, Linda stepped out of the closet, didn't she? Her face was pale, wasn't it? That was close, wasn't it? She said, her voice shaky. Too close, Jack agreed. We need to be more careful, don't we? Linda nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation, didn't she? They both knew they had narrowly escaped, hadn't they? From that day on, they were more cautious, weren't they? They couldn't afford another close call, could they? And Jack learned the importance of staying vigilant, didn't he? After all, one can't always rely on luck, can one? Jack and Linda's brush with danger had left them shaken, hadn't it? They knew they had to be more careful, didn't they? However, the thrill of their secret meetings was hard to resist, wasn't it? A few weeks passed, didn't they? Jack was at home one evening when he received a text from Linda, didn't he? Can I come over? George is out of town, she wrote, didn't she? Jack hesitated for a moment, considering the risks, didn't he? But his longing for Linda won out, didn't it? He texted back quickly, come over. Be careful. Linda arrived, and they spent a few hours together, didn't they? They laughed and talked, enjoying each other's company, didn't they? But as the night grew darker, their conversation turned serious, didn't it? Jack, we can't keep doing this, can we? Linda asked, her voice filled with worry. One day, George will catch us, won't he? Jack sighed, knowing she was right, wasn't he? I know, Linda. But I can't imagine my life without you, can I? He replied. We need to find a way out of this, don't we? Just as they were deep in conversation, the doorbell rang, didn't it? They both jumped, didn't they? It was far too late for casual visitors, wasn't it? Jack's heart raced as he went to check who it was, didn't it? Peering through the peephole, Jack saw a figure standing outside, cloaked in shadows, didn't he? He opened the door cautiously, didn't he? To his surprise, it was his old friend, Peter, wasn't it? "Peter. What are you doing here at this hour?" Jack asked, trying to sound casual, wasn't he? Peter looked serious, didn't he? "Can I come in?" "It's important," Peter said. Jack let him in, his mind racing, didn't he? Peter glanced around the room and noticed Linda, didn't he? "I didn't know you had company," he said, his tone curious, didn't he? "Linda was just leaving, wasn't she?" Jack said quickly. Linda stood up, giving Jack a worried look, didn't she? "She said a quick goodbye and left, didn't she?" Once Linda was gone, Peter turned to Jack, didn't he? "Jack, I need to talk to you about something serious," Peter said. "I saw George earlier today, didn't I? He was asking questions about you and Linda, wasn't he?" Jack felt a chill run down his spine, didn't he? "What did you tell him?" Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper, wasn't it? "I didn't tell him anything, did I?" Peter replied. "But he's suspicious, isn't he? You need to be very careful, don't you?" Jack nodded, realizing how close they were to being caught again, didn't he? "Thanks for the warning, Peter," he said. "I need to figure out what to do next, don't I?" After Peter left, Jack sat alone in his house, thinking about his situation, didn't he? He knew he had to end things with Linda before it was too late, didn't he? But the thought of losing her was unbearable, wasn't it? The next day, Jack called Linda, didn't he? "We need to talk," he said, his voice heavy with emotion, didn't it?